When I arrive at the ocean, I will stand on the beach and I'll scan the water. I will look to see if there's any diving birds. And if I see any seabirds diving, that means there's a school of fish there. So I remove my wedding band, earrings, necklace. And I do not wear tinted goggles. They're plain goggles. And because anything that's shiny, it'll, resemble like fish scales. And so a bigger fish, if something catches their eye, they'll come in to investigate. and I don't want to be investigated. So.
One day a couple months ago, I called up Pat Gallant-Charette, who lives outside Portland, Maine.
I am almost 70. I'll be 70 in a few months. I'm a retired registered nurse. I'm in the International Marathon Swim Hall of Fame, and I hold 6 Guinness World Records for various swims.
The title she's most proud of is her record as the oldest person to complete what's called the Triple Crown of open water swimming,
which is around Manhattan Island, English Channel, and the Catalina Channel in California.
Open water swimmers like Pat aren't allowed to wear wetsuits, even when they're swimming in really cold water. But there is one piece of equipment Pat always swims with.
I bring a shark shield with me. It's an electrical, invisible fence that sends an impulse that if a shark gets near a person, it tickles their snout and they turn around.
This is The Briny, a podcast about the way we're changing the sea and the way the sea changes us. I live in Maine, and last summer, a woman was killed by a great white shark while she was swimming with her daughter off the coast.
Maine Marine Patrol says it is investigating the death of a swimmer in a possible shark attack off the coast of Harpswell. This happened.
If officials confirm this was indeed a fatal shark attack, it will be the first in Maine's history.
You can only go in up to your ankles at Popham Beach, a restriction added for swimmers following Monday's deadly shark attack at nearby Bailey Island.
There was a full-on shark panic. In the middle of a summer when it seemed like going to the beach was one of the few safe things to do. Never mind that the experts said that great white sharks had always cruised the Gulf of Maine, and that this attack was the first fatality in the state since anyone had kept records. Or that the sharks were only interested in eating seals, not humans. Still, they put restrictions on how deep you could go in the water at the state beaches. They said it was important to stay in shallow water because great whites are ambush predators, meaning they approach their prey from below. When I went back in the water in the weeks after the attack, every time I put my head under, my heart started racing. I imagined seeing something coming up from the darkness. And 2 words kept repeating in my head. Ambush predator. Ambush predator. That's when I heard about Pat. When she's training for a marathon swim, Pat always stays in shallow water.
I never, ever go deep unless it's the day of the event. That's the only time I go in deep water.
And that's because of something that happened to Pat decades ago.
When I was 13, my brothers and I went clam digging. My mother, before we left, she says, "You be careful of that incoming tide." So, of course, being teenagers, we didn't listen to her. And we were clamming, and all of a sudden, we had our baskets filled, and we turned around to head back to land, which was only 300 yards. And all of a sudden, there was water surrounding us. So we had to abandon our clam baskets and our picks, and we had to swim for it. And I was only 13, and I had no fear. It was like, we just have to, swim a short distance. We were down by the jetty, and So anyway, we started swimming, and all of a sudden, my brother screamed shark. And when he screamed shark, I could tell he was not kidding. I mean, the tone of his voice frightened me. And I turned around, and there was something right behind me that went down. And I really thought that was a shark. And I panicked. I couldn't swim. And I thought I was going to drown. And I remember just flailing in the water, thinking, this is it. And then suddenly, about maybe 10 feet in front of me, a seal pops its head up. And it was a seal the whole time. It was not a shark. And I just couldn't get over that, that I thought I was going to drown. And it was all from fear. And I just can remember that fright that I had. And from that day forward, whenever I went back into the ocean, I never went deeper than my waist. Even when my children were younger, when we'd go to the ocean, it was always shallow water. Just that thought that they might be out there and having that fear instilled in me, at such a young age. I mean, it just carried with me.
You might think marathon swimmer would be an odd career path for someone like Pat, but something happened in her late 40s that changed her outlook.
My youngest brother, Robbie, at the age of 34, died suddenly of a heart attack.
Her brother, Robbie, was a serious swimmer, and he had competed in this race called the Peaks to Portland, which is a 2.4-mile swim from Peaks Island in Casco Bay to a beach near downtown Portland, Maine.
And Robbie had won the Peaks to Portland twice. My son, Tom, was 16 years old, and he was swimming on a local high school swim team. And he said he wanted to swim the Peaks to Portland as a tribute to his Uncle Robbie. And I remember saying to him, that's so sweet, I wish I could do the same. And he said, well, you can if you try. And I thought, well, why not? I'll give it a try. And I started training. It took me over a year before I even qualified. But I remember that very first day, just standing there with all these young, slender athletes. And here I was, gray hair, overweight. And I remember thinking to myself, what the heck did I get myself into? And then I started to think, Pat, who cares if you come in last? Who cares? So anyway, I started swimming, and at the halfway mark, I was by Fort Gorgeous in Casco Bay, and something clicked. There was something about the tranquility of being in the ocean. I remember seagulls were squawking above, and I remember seeing a couple of lobster boats go by, and it was just so tranquil. And I said, wow, I really, really like this. And any fear, I didn't have any at that time. And I was just focused now to getting to the finish line.
Pat liked being out on the water so much that she decided to keep swimming. At age 59, she swam across the Strait of Gibraltar. A year later, she swam the English Channel for the first time. All through her 60s, Pat kept swimming and breaking records. But every time she got on the water, fear came with her.
When I was swimming Northern Ireland to Scotland, that's a tough swim. But I was probably a half a mile out. The sun was just coming up, and I see something bigger than me circling me, but I couldn't make out what it was. But all I could see was something going around and around, and it was following me. And I was thinking, now what the heck is that? And about 5 minutes later, it's still with me. All of a sudden, it went vertical. And it was like, oh my word. I said, this thing's getting in position to come at me. It did come at me, but what it was this sea lion. And we came face to face. Could have touched it.
Pat has had a bunch of scares like this, and she has seen sharks. But she remembers how panicking almost made her drown when she was 13. So she talks to herself to calm down.
I'll say, okay, Pat, you have a shark shield. You have your crew that is watching for your safety. You also hired a boat crew that had the pilot and his crew watching for safety. Don't go to the negative thoughts, just stay focused and swim. Like swimming Catalina Island, that's off California coast. It's a 21-mile swim. The start of it is at midnight. And when we arrived, they had to shine a spotlight on the water. And here it is, pitch black out. Well, when they put the spotlight on, we could see all these shimmery fish. And I'm thinking, I wonder what's going to be following them. That's the first thing I thought of, because great whites are known in that area. And then all of a sudden we hear this sound behind the boat. It was a whale that was spouting through his blowhole. So I jumped in the water and then I started my swim. And probably 70% of that swim, I felt as though I was in this soundproof room listening to the sounds of whales communicate. That's all I could hear. It was like music. One mile out, I had something go underneath me that was bigger than me, and I could have touched its dorsal fin. I let out this blood-curdling scream, and my crew, they were laughing. And I was like, what the heck? And they said, Pat, those are dolphins, look around you. And there was about 100 dolphins that all congregated around me. So that was pretty cool. But as far as the fear, I always try to put it on the back burner. I figure, I get in the car every day and I could get in a car accident, but I don't stop driving because I'm fearful of getting in a car accident. Life is a risk, and I'm not about to stop because there are some fears.
I've been thinking about fear and caution and when one or the other of those things is justified. After a year spent cautiously and for good reason, I hope in 2021 to leave behind some of those fears that aren't worth holding on to. Pat's story is a reminder. On the other side of fear, sometimes there's a pod of dolphins swimming with you. The Briney is produced by me, Matt Frasica. Thanks for listening. The Briney is a member of Hub and Spoke, a collective of independent podcasts. Like Iconography. Hosted by Charles Gustine, Iconography is about the icons, real and imagined, that define our sense of place. Iconography's most recent episode happens to be about the movie that continues to shape the way we think and talk about sharks, Jaws.
Don't go where the danger is. Stay inside. Take serious precautions if you have to venture out, and the monster can't get us.
It's also about the ways Jaws helps us talk and think about COVID-19 and risk.
We've been shouting the same thing at our TVs this summer when we're watching the news that we've been shouting at them when we're watching Jaws for decades. Don't go to the beach. You don't need to. Stay home.
You can find Iconography at iconographypodcast.com. Check out all the Hub and Spoke shows at hubspokeaudio.com.
Hub
and Spoke Audio Collective.